What if I were to suggest that you play a key role in the awakening world? And that you are watching this because you have heard the call. We can start right now by opening our hearts and minds. Welcome to the awakening world.
Scott.
I was going to say somebody else needed to mute. Let's try that again. Welcome, everybody. I'm Love Coach Scott Katamas, and welcome to the Friday night edition of The Awakening World, now with Scott fully audioed. We've got a really beautiful show tonight. We're going to be talking about something that more and more people are learning about, asking about: epigenetics, about how our ancestors and their genetic history and their actual experiences of life influence us, impact us, how we carry the memory of their trauma in our bodies, and also how we need to be responsible going 7 generations or more ahead in our thinking and our consciousness. So it's going to be a very powerful show, and we've got some wonderful guest presenters. I do want to welcome those of you who are watching on Facebook, and a big thank you to John and Summer Raymer and the Sign Network for putting us out to as many as 100 different Facebook groups and pages. And you can join us in the Zoom room, which is a wonderful thing to do, and it's easy. If you just go to the globalpeacetribe.com, it's easy to remember because it's right behind me, globalpeacetribe.com, and then click where it says join summer season now, or where it might say register, and then you can register, and you're going to get the links to not just tonight's show, but all of our shows between now and the end of September. And you know, we do 3 shows every week: Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday morning. So please do join us. I also want to invite everybody, let us know where you're coming from geographically. And I see a lot of our regulars, a lot of our wonderful friends are with us. Let us know where you are geographically. Welcome Leaf and Eleanor and Eugene and Karen and Mark and so many of our regulars that are with us. And speaking of regulars that are with us, she's back. Trish, who I've been blessed to do the show with for over 2 years, is back from a little hiatus. Welcome back, Trish.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone.
One highlight from your time away.
Gosh. One of the Fridays I spoke, I told a very wild story about my life on a program, live on a program called Body Storytelling. I told a very sexy story in front of 80 people. And that was one of the wild, funny things that I did.
Beautiful, fun. All right, well, welcome back. It's great to have you with us. And we're going to hear a lot from this wonderful presenter. This is Krista, who's been on the show once before. We met her when we were doing the Soul Search show. And I was so impressed with what she had to say that I invited her back. And she's a psychic medium, transformational guide, energy healer, DNA activator, and as is most relevant for today, an epigenetic health coach. She specializes in receiving clear intuitive guidance and divine source wisdom, guiding you, our audience, to activate the ultimate expression of the DNA and to master the magical alchemy of their own life. We're going to learn all about Krista and her work with epigenetics in just a little bit. Krista, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Scott and Trish. Such an honor to be here and so excited to dive into this topic this evening.
Beautiful. That's always my reminder to record, which we're doing. And we've got Chief Phil Lane with us. And many of you know Phil, but for any of you who don't, Trish is going to tell you all about him.
Oh, I'm really excited. Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. is an enrolled member of the Yankton, Dakota. Did I say that right? And the Chickasaw Nations, and is an internationally recognized leader in human and community development. He was born at the Haskell Indian School in Lawrence, Kansas in 1944. He has extensive experience in his own cultural traditions and is an award-winning author and film producer. Let's hear more about that. Your books and your films. And international recognition for his work in promoting freedom and justice for Indigenous peoples by building human and spiritual capacity that focuses on healing the root causes of racism, oppression, and other disintegrations. Sorry, I'm just like adding words to your bio here rather than focusing on conflict. I think this is wonderful. I'm happy to be here with you. Chief, would you mind taking us through a prayer?
Yes. Mitaki Epi, my very, very, very beloved relatives of the human family. What a joy to be here at this time of great transformation and change as long prophesied across the Americas and around the world. So I'd like to give a little opening prayer here, as we know the foundation of all life is a spiritual foundation. O Tunkashna Wakantaka, creator of the universe, most beloved one, all powerful one, most kind one, most compassionate one, ever forgiving one. O ancient of days, O blessed beauty, we open our hearts and minds to your inspiration, to your wisdom, to your guidance as we explore with all our relatives, past, present, and future, who are clear, close to our closest vein, your whole understanding of epigenetics. We ask all the tribes and nations of the East, and the South, and the West, and the North to come together in unity and harmony, reflecting the oneness of our human family, that we might truly unite our human family in war and begin peace on earth by 2030. With thanksgiving to Father Sky, thanksgiving to all those masculine qualities of life, at the same time asking we might become into balance so we don't see further destruction upon our Mother Earth. And we call upon and give humility to our beloved mothers who gave us life, who gave us strength, who gave us the capacity to have this beautiful life, and our fathers as well. We also, even if they're only there for those moments, we give thanksgiving because they've given us this most beautiful, beloved time to be born and to have life. And let's close with this prayer for unity of our human family. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal unto them thy great purpose. May they follow in thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, lead them not to themselves, but guide their steps with the light of knowledge and cheer their hearts for thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. And to Kashwa Kantaka, finally, we just ask from the depths of our heart that those relatives, especially those 400,000 young people, children in Yemen, and many other children who are being damaged, not just themselves, but for generations, from starvation, from the lack of us truly understanding. We are one human family, and the hurt of one is the hurt of all, including all our animal relatives, our plant relatives, our minerals, water, all things. And that we dedicate ourselves again to unifying our human family, ending war, and beginning peace on earth by 2030. Hallelujah chante washtelo, shikmano he meado, chinupasaba he meado, hallelujah chante washte. And this is how we close as Dakota people, saying, my names are Shinupasapa and Shukmano, and I stand responsible fully before the Creator for all my words and my actions. Hallelujah chante washte.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you very, very, very much. It's a beautiful story.
Cross of ages, revealing light within the fall. We share the joy in living, as finally we know about a future. This moment is all we have to know. We walk the path together, and hand in hand we grow. We walk on earth, we're building an eternity. Now all can see the way back home again, bridging heaven and earth. Rejoice in human form. Our lives becoming dearer. There's truth in everyone. Our love is like a river to which the world can come to drink. An ocean wind together, and with one mind we think. As we walk on earth, bridging heaven and earth. Bridging heaven and earth.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's all give a twinkle to our beloved brother Omashar.
It was actually written for a show called Bridging Heaven and Earth out of Santa Barbara. It was specially commissioned from that, so it's kind of special to my heart.
Oh, thank you so much, brother Omashar. It's always such a joy to have you with us. Thank you so much. I'm going to put the spotlight on Krista, and she is really who kind of started the idea of us doing this show when I had her on our show previously. And she started talking about how she's weaving epigenetics into her support of other people. I thought that was really fascinating. So I'm just going to ask you, Krista, about kind of your evolution of being a psychic and an intuitive healer and working with people, and then how you're bringing the ancestry, the understanding of ancestry into your work. I think that's really fascinating.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. To be here in the presence of all of you is just such a beautiful gift. And wow, I can't even tell you how much I'm in my heart right now. And Omashar, just what you said about bridging heaven and earth, you know, that is a huge mission that I'm here. So no wonder I just got right into that space, not only with Chief's prayer, but also your song. So thank you. So I'd love to share a little bit about my evolution and story into this place. And, you know, I remember as a child getting intuitive information and just thinking it was normal. And then in high school, realizing it wasn't normal. And then, you know, evolving into college and just realizing that it was a big part of my life, but didn't really know what to do with it. And I would say that about 10 years ago in 2012, when I moved to Southern California, a lot started changing in my world. And at that time, I was in the program of working a lot, you know, being a workaholic, thinking that's what I had to do to be successful, working a lot of hours, grinding at a job, you know, taking part in, you know, way more than I could really take on, social events. You know, I started binge drinking and just, you know, everything I needed to do to keep up. And at the same time that I stepped into that, a lot of other things were happening in my world that kept it in check. I mean, I would go home, lights would be turning on and off in my home, glasses would fall off of tables for no unexpected reason. And there was certainly a presence around me that was getting my attention in a very big way. At the time, I was very scared because I had moved to Southern California without any friends or family. And in that time, I was so grateful I had a friend who referred me to somebody who supported me. And I really got to step into learning how to use my intuition for good, how I realized that my light was attracting not only people on this dimension, but in other dimensions, and how as the human, I was in control and that I was able to have the power and to direct my energy in ways that would support not only myself, but others. And, you know, as that evolution continued and that greater self-awareness became a stronger force in my life, you know, other things started to break down that needed to break down in order for me to step into a higher expression of myself and higher light. And of course, align with the service and offerings that I'm here to bring to humanity. And so, you know, there was a car accident that really woke me up as well. And some pretty severe hormone issues in my 30s that took me down the path of wondering what in the world is going on that my body is reacting in these ways. And it's obviously trying to get my attention. It was at that time that I stumbled across, and I just maybe not stumble because everything happens in divine order, across a podcast that was about epigenetics. And when I got to hear this doctor speak about the science of epigenetics and how we can control the expression of our genetics, and that we are not defined by the genes that we are born with, it really opened my mind. And I thought, wow, is there a piece of my health puzzle that I don't know about that I can tap into? And so, I was on the computer. I want to get this test. I want to coach. And in that moment, there's divine moments in our lives that really speak to us. And in that moment, I knew that I wasn't only supposed to get this test, but that I was supposed to become a certified epigenetic health coach and support others in this. So that was a beautiful, beautiful thing that happened. And I took that deep dive and got to understand the science of genetics, how we can upregulate and downregulate genes. And, just to bring this into context, because not everyone here may understand or even know what epigenetics is or means. And I know that Chief Phil is going to come into this as well on this topic, but epi means above. So how can we be above our genetics? And a great analogy is, let's just think about a computer. The computer has the hardware that is hardwired, right? That's like your DNA, what you were born with. But the software tells the computer what to do. So your lifestyle, whether it be your nutrition, your environment, the type of exercise you do, the type of people you hang around, all of those things are affecting the way your genes express. And so I found this fascinating. And I found that, yes, I still need my blood labs and I need my, the different professionals that were supporting me in my health journey, but this was a whole new piece of the puzzle. And when we think about hormones, there were so many doctors that I had tuned into that just wanted me to put a cream on my body, and something in me said I didn't need to do that. And when we realize there's things like endocrine disruptors that can affect hormones, when we can identify all those things that might be affecting our expression, then we can rule different things out. So that's a little bit about the science of that. And, just to fast forward a bit, this wasn't just, a night and day sort of journey for me. It's been, now over 4 years that I've become, immersed in epigenetics, but that I also had things that I needed to address in my health. One of them for me was breast implants. And stay with me because there's a really big story about lineage and ancestral healing in this. And part of what I was speaking about earlier was my journey as a workaholic. The programming I received growing up about you have to work hard to be successful, to make money, and I didn't take a lot of breaks. I didn't take a lot of vacations. And I also thought I had to look a certain way to be successful. And a lot of that came with, the stigma of what I thought I had to look like to be successful in Southern California, Botox, breast implants, all the toxic beauty, all those things. And I will just preface this with saying that there are many reasons that people get plastic surgery. And that's not the topic of this evening. But the topic is, I knew for me that there were 3 things that happened within about a 1-month period that told me that this was no longer aligned with me. And so I was going along this journey of explanting. And, within 2 months, I had the surgery booked and was just as fast as I wanted to get them in 12, 13, 14 years ago, I wanted them out that fast too. It's just that knowing. And about 48 hours out from the surgery, because I am in tune, with my authentic self, my heart, I said to myself, I need to go out in nature and do some healing, the inner work around this. And so I was living in Palm Desert, California at the time, and I went out. It was, at the end of summer, it was hot, I don't know, 115 degrees or something, but I'm out in the desert and I am releasing so much. Just my personal decisions, the things that have taken me to this place, knowing I was making a decision for my highest health, but realizing that there was a lot coming up. And in that, what I didn't expect was that I saw past me 3 generations. And I saw that I healed that because of what I was bringing in. I was calling in all of the times that I had been a victim of my own self-deprecation or chosen to be that victim. All the times that there's been judgment, not only upon myself, but from other family members, mothers to daughters, husbands to wives, sisters to sisters, whatever. I saw all the dynamics in all of those dimensions. And I thought, wow, I brought in all that awareness and I just cleared it. And I asked, Archangel Michael to cut those cords, to transmute and release all of those old stories and transmute them to the light of God. But in that, I heard Spirit say, oh, you saw 3 generations, but you actually healed 7. And I did not even remember that came up until the last time we were here on the Awakening show with Scott. And he said that we actually can heal 7, there's 7 generations. And so I kind of started piecing things together after that show and realized that was such a powerful thing that happened on my own journey that allowed me to see how powerful we are to not only heal the lifetime that we are living in this now, but 7 generations past. And the decisions that we make to provide healing now also affect all those going forward. So there's so much magic and alchemy in that, and so much more to go on beyond that. But that's just kind of the gist of what has happened in my own journey to get me to this place where I'm using my intuitive skills, my epigenetic health coaching skills, energy healing skills, and bringing all these things to bridge the science and the spirituality to help people align with their ultimate expression of their DNA and ultimately live the magical alchemy of their own life. So thank you.
Krista, thank you so much for sharing that story. And I want to hear how that impacts Trish in a moment, and then we'll hear from Brother Phil. But, what she was referencing is that we had a guest, and I don't even remember what it was. It might have been Bruce Lipton. It might have been Deepak Chopra, but it was one of those guys. And they said that it's been biologically proven that before we're even born, we are in utero and we receive a genetic download of the trauma of our ancestors going back at least 7 generations. And that's a lot of people. That's, if you add up the numbers, it's like, I think over 300 people. And so everything, that means that we have in our genetic memory starvation, rape, murder, war, famine. It's remarkable how we have that inside of our system. So I'm going to see what Trish may have to say in response to what you just heard from Krista.
So thank you for sharing so personally. I think that a lot of us can resonate with some of those pieces and coming to our own ahas. Just, it's giving me the ability to process some of my own stuff as well. I'm coming at it from this conversation from another perspective, from the psychological and from taking a course with Bridge Feltis called Heal Thyself, a Transformative Initiation for People Racialized as White. And so looking at it from this filter of I've known this work as intergenerational trauma work, is looking at how your DNA literally shifts through the certain chemistry that you are running. So if my ancestors, however many generations back, are running lots of fear, or if they're running cortisol and adrenaline, or if they're running, epinephrine and dopamine, that's literally going to change your body and the way that your your brain and how you move. So I grew up in a really poor household. My mother's family was also very poor. And I can trace a lot of my, not only beliefs, but my feelings, my thought processes back as far as I can to my great grandmother, who one of our generational traumas is I'm alone. I can't trace it back further than my great grandmother, just because she's no longer alive. And so when you're looking at generations of traumatic experience, you're starting to see how, when you see maybe some people who you might perceive as quote unquote degenerates, that maybe taking a compassionate approach and look back at what struggles in their family line or in their historical social line that they're working with. Does this make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
Absolutely.
I mean, and then there's also a lot of social structure stuff. There's a lot of belief systems. There's a lot going on, not only just in our own genetics and our own DNA, right?
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it more eloquently, Trish. So thank you. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. And I believe one of the most important things for us to remember when we are wondering, why am I this way? Or why did I say that? Sometimes the things that we are expressing are not even our own. They are from those past generations. So, if we can understand that and give ourselves a little extra grace and say, where is this coming from? Is this even mine? And can this stop with me? Can I stop this in my lifetime so it doesn't move forward? And I know that the last time we spoke we didn't go into this very deeply, Scott, but just to be noted, that article on Scientific American recently, and we can put the link here, that actually scientifically is proving that dependents or children of Holocaust survivors have higher cortisol levels, higher risk of PTSD, even though they were not physically in that trauma. It is carried through. So, there's nothing woo-woo about this. This is proven in science. And, there's so much more to the story that we get to address. And when we can just honor that and bring it forward and acknowledge it and know that it might not even be our own, and how can we heal this, and just say yes to the ultimate and most high expression, whether it be our health or our spiritual life or our emotional or mental health, then that's where we get to claim our power back.
Beautiful. It's interesting that you brought that up. I'm actually going to put the spotlight on one of our regulars, Mark Danisovsky, because Mark has an amazing story right along the lines of what you were just talking about, Krista. And he put that in the chat box. So, and I noticed that Chief Phil, who we were going to go to next, Phil is back. Okay, he left for a minute, but he's back. But Mark, go ahead and tell your story, and then we'll introduce Phil.
I'm waiting for Chief Phil myself. So, but it's extremely coincidental with what she was just speaking about, because my experience was I'm a musician. I've had a very sensitive life. My father died when I was 14 years old, so that was in 1973, and I never knew his life story. But in my 20s, I started to have just incredible experiences of dreams of war, and and there was a whole Nazi thing that was around too. And I grew up in a Hungarian neighborhood, so there was kind of the ethos of Hungarian immigrant neighborhood, with what happened in 1956, and then there was World War II. Well, my father in World War II, I found out 25 years after he died, had escaped from the Nazis and lived in the woods for 3 years with 3 other men that did that. And one of the guys was still alive, and he told me about it. My father never said a word. I didn't know anything about it, but I was having extreme experiences when I was the same age as my father was when he was going through the extreme trauma of World War II. It's just it's impossible to comprehend it. So it was affecting me, and I grew up Hungarian Catholic, which is very interesting. It's really like being in some sort of Gothic tale. And if you can step out of it, you can appreciate the magnitude of what you're experiencing. And so anyway, I later found out about epigenetics. And in fact, one of the main things that has happened in watching these shows every Fridays and Saturdays is starting to really process trauma, to realize I had other traumatic events that happened in my life, but processing trauma. And another coincidence is there was a song in a Kate Bush, there was a lyric in a Kate Bush song that I heard in the 1980s, and it said, "Never think that you can't change your past." It's in one of her songs. And so she's in that. That just stuck out in my head. Now, another segue quickly is that I'm a musical director in theater, and I've done Fiddler on the Roof many times, right? And I was the conductor, and I was playing the accordion for a show in San Diego. And my consciousness of this whole processing was to consciously use music to go back in time and heal what the play was about. And if you've seen Fiddler on the Roof, and even though I made my life in theater, I'm not a big musical theater guy, but if you see Fiddler on the Roof, you know that there's something very, very powerful in that show. It's a true masterpiece, And so that was my goal, was to go back in time and use what I could to heal the collective experience, because that was part of the experience of the audience too. Many of the people in the audience had been through it, So so I've lived my life alone, because I have to say instinctively, I knew that there was something wrong in there, I'm high functioning, I was working on my PhD in biochemistry, and I became a pianist, and now I'm a professional accordionist. But I have to say that there's always been something intense. Like, why is everything always intense? Well, in terms of family genetics, it's there, and to have experienced it and not know, so that's what. And I have to say that the Global Peace Tribe has helped me immeasurably deal with it consciously. And I had a lot of time, COVID, if you used it wisely, if you have a busy, hectic life, you can actually dig in and focus on important things, because you could, and so I've been working on that and understanding epigenetics. And so I just wanted to share my story.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for being with us almost every week. You're one of our regulars. So thank you for sharing that. It's peeling of an onion, isn't it? We're just going to keep learning and learning and learning. When Christian and I decided to do this show, we talked about how wonderful it would be to have someone with an Indigenous background who can really talk about, because of course we know that the Native people have been talking so often. I mean, since I was a kid, I've always heard the Indigenous people talk about think 7 generations ahead, think 7 generations ahead. And my first thought was, well, we got to get Chief Phil Lane. Let's see if we can get Phil on the show. What I didn't know when I reached out to Phil is he has a whole background in epigenetics. And we're going to hear all about that. Here is one of my absolute favorite human beings. I'm so grateful that we have Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. with us today. And Phil, take it away. I'm eager to hear what you want to share with us about this really fascinating topic.
Yes. Mitaki Epi, my very, very beloved members of our human family, let's give thanksgiving to be here sharing with you from the sacred, unsurrendered, sovereign lands of the Semiahmoo First Nations of the Salish Nation. And I want to thank Scott and Trish, Omoshar, Krista, so beautiful to hear you articulating this, and our brother who's just shared. his personal experience. It's so important that we be able to tell our stories. For me, when I first really began to reflect on epigenetics was when I first went to the University of Washington. I'd been gone from my home for a year, hitchhiking around Europe and so forth. And I went into university. And I remember after the first semester, I had a course in psychology, some related course. And I came back, thinking I knew more than my father, my beloved father, which, he was way, way, way ahead of me. But I came back and said, Dad, we are products of our environment. He laughed. He said, son, okay, I got a question for you. Take a setter. He raised setters, they are able to go out and point pheasants. He said, take a setter, raise him in a 20-story building in New York City, never having gone out in the natural world. And then bring him here and let him out into a field. He's going to point. Why is that? Why is that? If he's a product of his environment, how can that happen? Oh, I didn't have much of an answer to that. And then I began to reflect. Okay, because I knew some identical twins that I went to school with. And I began to realize, at the same time, they looked the same, but they acted differently. So I knew it wasn't just heredity, although I could see that in our animal relatives. It was also the environment. And of course, during my day, we had this big discussion about between the environment and heredity, genes, genetic development versus environment. In fact, that was the basis by which judgments were made about people of color, that somehow they were genetically inferior. Of course, that was behind Hitler's whole thing about a superior race genetically, where if you're blonde and blue eyes, you were superior as human beings. And you had the right then to enslave others or to treat them, especially if they were, because politically he wanted to get rid of our Jewish relatives for whatever reasons, they were genetically inferior. And so I began to understand that both are what's happening. And then I began to hear the word epigenetics. And of course, as Krista shared with us, it means above genetics. It means there's something more than just genetics. And then I, of course, had been raised and shared with my father about how Dakota child raising unfolded. Then it became very clear that as I began to study more and more in university, I had the opportunity to study with two incredible gentlemen, both who passed the spiritual worlds, Dr. Jan Jordan and Dr. Donald Streets. And they had what they called the Anisa model. It's a Sanskrit word for the tree of life. And then they really begin to explain, especially what happens in our own, not only when we're born, but actually in the womb. And myself, I experienced a situation where there was this 1944, right in the middle of the war. Of course, everybody was following Dr. Spock type people. And the idea was breastfeeding wasn't so good. Formula was the way to go. And so my mother, they were living on the campus of Haskell Indian School, Indian Institute, which was an Indian boarding school, and with my grandmother and my auntie. And so the doctor said, you must give him formula. And so the problem was the doctor, what he prescribed was way, way less formula I needed to live. And so, of course, I began to cry. Of course, you don't have any food, you cry. And she called the doctor. The doctor said, oh, again, we know the source where this comes from. He said, oh, don't pick him up, you'll spoil him. Of course, I cried for about 3 weeks until I fell into a coma. They put me in a hospital and finally gave me intravenous. And then they, of course, they got the thing right. But that had, I know, tremendous impact on me. And then when I was 12, I was sexually abused. And I know that had a big impact because, for instance, in this development of our being, of this incredible genetic 12-stranded DNA we have, there's a process by which this all unfolds. Everything has a natural way of unfolding. And they found, for instance, that the sexual abuse of young girls or young boys prior to or close to puberty has tremendous impacts on the development of that human being, especially if the people who abuse them, sexually abuse them, are close relatives, because that whole dimension of ourselves, our sexuality, is not to be actualized at that point. And it causes all kinds of issues in people's lives. And then as we begin to study the actual research going on, of course, we have the Chinese famine of 1959 to 1961, which is a primary study of epigenetics. The Dutch famine of 1944 to 1945, another major study, finding that when our human family members starve, it has tremendous impact on future generations. And then I began to relate that. For instance, after General Custer and the 7th Cavalry were, wiped out when they entered into a sacred Sundance in which the government had promised no one to enter that territory. There was a policy passed by the US Congress called Starve or Surrender Act, in which at one time there was 60 million buffalo relatives going across the high plains, reduced to about 1,000. So the starvation that hit, not only at that time, but that was a policy of the US government, starve or surrender, literally by the US Congress. The impact that had on future generations, the starvation. And that's why today, one of the things that's just sickening, not just in Yemen, but everywhere in the world where we have children starving to death, in Somalia, all these different places, but right now, by the way, supported by both the Republican and Democratic parties, there's 400,000 children in Yemen starving to death, right on the verge. And they're doing the same thing they did here. They're preventing the fuel to be there. So if you can see all these trucks lined up trying to bring food, they barricaded the seaways into Yemen. And so these children literally are starving to death. And so these kind of actions that have taken place in the future are taking place not only here, but many places in the world. They're going to have a tremendous impact on our human family in the future as things go on as well. I know, having been brought up by my mom and dad, who are both from Chickasaw and Dakota background, while at the same time having a French, Irish, and English background, that whole conflict within, just to think about how the English and French went at it, and the English and the Irish went at it, that conflict, plus, our conflict we had as Ilcheti Shikoan, as well as Chickasaws, and having all that within us. I mean, all that conflict within us. And I tell you, in my young days, I was just full of rage and anger and hatred. And obviously, if you grow up in a society that somehow has people of color, indigenous people less than, and you realize and take the side of your indigenous side, you hate that part of yourself that has anything to do with being quote unquote a white person. And so you have this inner conflicts, hatred. Now, that hatred and anger can carry you so far. I remember in athletics, I'll tell you, I won in that football field. I was fighting against the 7th Cavalry. I don't care who played against me. In practice, I felt the same way. When I was wrestling, that was General Custer across from me, and I wanted to hurt him. But in a while, you carry that hatred and anger. What happens? You fall into alcoholism, drug abuse, unhealthy relationships. Which, by the way, the greatest disease we could ever have is addiction, because the only way out is a spiritual path. And thankfully, 1967, I began that path. Didn't mean all of a sudden that your tests and difficulties don't end, because there is another understanding. You think, you say, you believe it will not be tested. Of course we're tested. So it's always a test as we go along life. And we get tested till we leave here, till we go on the other side camp. And then as I got more deeply into the study, and especially here in my older last quarter of my life, I began to really understand, in order to come back into full strength, there was a number of things that we can do to change these, because what happens is all this genetic, all these genes get turned on and off. They can be turned off, and they can be turned off and on. But I began to realize how important diet was. Diet, literally, how you eat and what you eat is going to impact you in terms of health or no health. Obesity. Over 2 years ago, I was 210 pounds. I dropped down through this Epigenetics process and other processes we're working on, down to 165. What a difference. Physical activity. Wow. If you don't have physical activity, if you're not out there walking a little bit, you're in trouble. And by the way, another dimension of this is tobacco smoking. You're sitting there smoking a cigarette, which I did in my life. It's going to impact your health. Environmental pollutants, psychological stress, that changes your genetic turning it off and on. It impacts your life, your health. And by the way, one of the interesting things that they related directly to cancer is working night shift, because there's certain natural rhythms, circadian rhythms. And when we break those circadian rhythms, it impacts us. And so that is, from my perspective, and there's more to share, but we want to kind of share around the circle here, that we have the capacity, and I especially say this to my elder relatives, we don't have to die laying in bed watching Netflix series for hours and hours. We don't have to die. Instead, we should, as elders, have the greatest time in our life now. Because I'll tell you, last thing is, if you're in the 400 meters, you're playing a basketball game, football game, it's great the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, but what counts is the last quarter. That's where it counts. That's where it counts. And that's where we elders have a responsibility. We're the ones in those before us have brought our world to this place, mainly our men, by the way, masculine dimensions, the masculine quality. It's time for us to arise, and we can become new and fresh and strong again. How we talking, yes.
Beautiful. Thank you, Phil. And yes, I'm in the last quarter of my life, probably. And so let's make it the best quarter for sure. Thank you. And we're going to hear a lot more from Phil. We're going to take some questions. But I want to ask you, Krista, how do you utilize this in your work? So when somebody comes to you and you're coaching them, what's an example of how this understanding of epigenetics comes into play, and how do you support people with that?
That's such a great question, Scott, and so glad to answer that. So there's a few different ways that this works, because some people really want to dive in from the health aspect first, where they actually have a genetic test, which is just a swab test. It takes 2 to 3 weeks to get back the results and run the data through a report, so that we can see what's actually going on with the genetics, and then have a conversation to identify what's expressing or what's not. And a great example of what that means is, I mean, if any doctor, anyone looked at my personal genetic report, they would probably think I'm diabetic because I have a high genetic propensity for insulin resistance. But it's not expressing because I hardly touch sugar with a 10-foot pole, right? So those are the things that happen when somebody said, let's dive in from a health standpoint. So that's one of the ways. The other way and the other angle is sometimes people want to just move through whatever's coming up emotionally that's holding them back or causing blocks. And, you know, some of the biggest things are problems in relationships, you know, weight, being overweight. Obviously, that's an epidemic in our society. The other one is scarcity around money. That's a big one that I support. And so sometimes, let's just use that one as an example. When somebody's in scarcity around money, we can actually just have a conversation about those things that have come up in this lifetime and bring all of that into awareness. And then I also use, you know, my psychic skills in order to bring in any information or answer questions that might be coming up about, you know, why these things have occurred and what needs to occur in order for that to be healed and for that person to transcend and release that limited belief that we know if we are connected to the same intelligence that has created this universe, there is possibility and infinite possibilities, and we don't need to be limited. That's a personal choice, but also the programming that's brought us into limitation. So we get to choose to release. So in those moments, we also work with all of that information that comes in. And again, sometimes it's not even always only in this lifetime. It might be of what's come through. You know, what do you remember about your grandparents or your parents or your great-grandparents? You know, did they live through the Great Depression, or what was their lifestyle? And so we bring all those things into awareness. And ultimately, what I love doing the most, though, Scott, and to everyone here, is blending the two, because then you get a full picture. So when we know what's going on and what's expressing from a health standpoint in the genetics, and this person can't sleep, for example, they can't sleep. Why can't they sleep? Well, we ruled out everything health-wise. You know, do they have, do they have gluten intolerance? You know, what's showing up in their genes around that? Are they eating pasta every night, which is, you know, causing issues with the glutamic acid, which keeps them awake and creates anxiety, therefore they're not sleeping. You know, if we can rule out the health things, then we can know this is deeply rooted somewhere else. And then we can start healing things from a more emotional standpoint and a generational standpoint. So those are all the things and all the tools we use to bring everything together. So hopefully that answers your question. And I definitely go into it more on my Soul Search website, and happy to always talk to somebody a little bit about what's happening too. But what I'm happy to share as well, one of the women I worked with recently around scarcity and money, and thank you for pulling up my Soul Search website. We actually did a clearing around this and an activation, a DNA activation around abundance and wealth. And within 1 week, not only had she drawn resources from sources that she had never received before, like a $500 check showed up in the mail, but she also found the confidence after 3.5 years of working in a job that she was not seen, was not valued for her skills and all the things she brought. She was able to speak up to that boss and get a significant raise and a promotion. And so those are the things that when I witness people actually breaking through and having palpable shifts in their life or their bank accounts, you know, and their belief system and their ability to speak, that's when we know that we are shifting that genetic expression and changing that gene and turning on the genes to help somebody be in their ultimate expression.
Beautiful. Well, we're definitely going to hear more from Krista, and we're going to learn about what she's doing on 11/11. But for right now, since she mentioned her website, I do want to bring it up. And a reminder, we love Soul Search. We're going to be doing another weekend of shows with Soul Search at the end of August 2 weeks from now. And Soul Search is a wonderful way to find people like Krista, to find the right healers, to find the people to, go deeper in your work. And so here is her Soul Search website. And it's easy, just go to soulsearch.io and then put in Morea Collins, also known as Krista. And then this is how you can contact her and see if she's the right coach, the right person to work with you. And so
Scott, I actually have a little link for a questionnaire there for an exploratory call, just to see if we're a good match. So anyone can go ahead and fill that out, and they can also reach out directly if they have any questions or a message they want to send as well. So if you just scroll down a bit, there's a link right there. Begin your journey.
All right, apply for a complimentary. There it goes.
Yeah.
Apply for, wow, 30 minutes. You give away 30 minutes. That's very generous.
Yeah. Fill that out if you would like, and then I can connect with you further.
Great.
It's about 8 questions, just brief, just so I can get a little more information and see if we might be a match.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's very generous of you. And we're going to hear back from Krista. We've got more questions for her. Krista, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about family constellation work.
Mm-hmm.
And another Soul Search friend who I met in Sedona just when I was there last week is with us in the audience. And I'm going to bring her up right now. This is Laura. And hey, Laura, welcome.
Hey, everyone. How are you doing? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chief Phil and Krista and all of you. It has been wonderful. I love the subject.
Well, now, so tell us a little bit about what family constellation work is and how that ties into, again, working with our epigenetics and our ancestral history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is so connected because family constellation work works with the morphogenetic field and the epigenetics as well. Because with the family constellation, we believe that we inherited not just the color of our hair, the color of our eyes, but we also inherited traumas, right? As we already talked today, we inherit traumas, and if somebody was starving in your family, emotional traumas, relationships. So this is the epigenetics, but family constellation also works with what we call morphogenetic field. And the morphogenetic field, this theory, but for me it's more than a theory because it's real. It shows that we are all connected as a big system, right? We have the big system of the human race, and then we have the smaller systems as well, like we have the tribes, we have the communities, and we have the family systems. And of course, we have the animal systems and the plant systems, but we are all connected. And with the morphogenetic field that we use in family constellation, we understand that the well-being of one is the well-being of all. So this means if you're in your family system, right, and you have some unresolved trauma that happened in your family, it is most likely that somebody from your family will bring that in their bodies. Just like Krista mentioned about this article about the Holocaust, right? And they just did this research and they made the test and saw they have high levels of cortisol. So they brought there in their bodies and their system. So with family constellation, what we bring, we work with the field and the epigenetics, and we bring balance to the family system. We work in a soul level, bringing balance to the family system. So I don't know if everybody knows exactly or experience family constellation, but usually what happens, let's say a client say, okay, I'm having this issue in my life, and I don't know where it's coming from. For instance, I have this horrible pain. I already went to all type of doctors. I made therapy. I did everything. And I don't know where it's coming from. And usually this is something for us to think about. Oh, that's interesting, because there is a big chance that it's not coming from him, that it's coming from somebody in his family. Let's say that he will come for a session, and then we're all here. Sometimes we can do sessions via Zoom, and this person will choose some people to represent their family members. You can choose somebody to represent. We always bring the mother and the father, and sometimes we bring all the way 7 generations back. because the issue can be all the way 7 generations back. And we'll work in this system to bring balance to the family system, and also to find where the issue might be in that system, on the client system. So it's not so easy to explain, but I suggest if you never participate in a family constellation session too, you can participate just like hearing and watching, because it's very interesting to see, because inside the morphogenetic field, let's say if Krista will represent Scott's mother in a family constellation, and Krista starts feeling the things that Scott's mother would feel, because she enters at Scott's morphogenetic field of his family. And then we can get information from Krista that actually is representing Scott's mother in a family constellation. And it's incredible. Sometimes people start having like nervous tick, and we don't say it to anybody who is the person yet. And the person that is the client said, okay, my uncle had that nervous tick. Said, okay, so your uncle is here, is being represented here. There is a chance that what the hidden situation is coming actually from your uncle. Am I clear? People, let me know, because it's not so easy to explain.
Laura, you are doing a fantastic job explaining. I've done probably 20. I used to be in a weekly series, and it was always very hard to explain what happens there, and explain how it happens and how transformative it is. And the person that I sat with would say the term "the field," and I'd be like, "What the hell is the?" My logical brain is like, "What is the field?" But I think what you did a really fine job at explaining is really how it happens and how it really translates to the body through a very really like psychological language. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, it does. And things get resolved, right? In the soul level. Maybe it's like father and a mother that never talked. But in the soul level, and people representing the mother and father, we can use some sentences, some healing sentences to heal in the soul level. So everybody will benefit, even if the person already passed away, right? Those generations from the past will benefit. And of course, the generations in the future will benefit as well from this trauma being revealed and from being released during the session as well. It's amazing. We're all connected, right? If we start to think about that, we're all connected. The well-being of one affects everybody, because that's what it is.
Yes.
Well, since we're all connected, I've brought up all of our coaches. I've got Krista and Phil now back with us. And we're going to take some questions. And so real quickly, one of our regulars, Jeffrey, reminds us that if people want to learn more about the morphogenetic field, they can go to resonancescience.org, resonancescience.org, and learn all about the morphogenetic field that way. And I've put into the chat box Laura's website. So if people want to learn more about that, well, I want to make sure that it came through. Okay, there it is. And her website again is lifechangebreakthroughs.com. lifechangebreakthroughs.com. So the first question that came in from one of the people watching on Facebook, Krista, you talked about people taking a test, and the question was, how do they do that? Like, what's the way to actually take that initial test? You said it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get the results. How do people do that? Where do they get that? What's the step that they would take?
Yeah, absolutely. If they connect with me and they decide to go down this journey, then we order the test kit and have it shipped right to their home. And it just takes just a few minutes to take that test and send it in. And then we get the results in 2 to 3 weeks. And then we have a conversation about what's showing up in the genetic report and what's expressing or what's not. And that's what the epigenetic health coach, and that's what I'm certified to do, is to go through that information with them.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then we've got a question for you, Phil. And you talked very dynamically about kind of overcoming your anger towards, a certain race of people. So are there any thoughts about how we deal with racism? And this might be something that Trish is interested in too, because she works so much with racism. But, obviously there's been so much history of us being taught that people of a different culture, a different race are ignorant or less than, or whatever it may be, less spiritual, less whatever. So the question, and kind of taking a very long question, trying to isolate it, is how do we work with our own cultural judgments that we've been indoctrinated with, especially the ones we might not even be aware of?
Well, I'm going to kind of address this by addressing the reality of just how close we are to our relatives of the past. And a lot of times people say, oh, how I'm not the one who did this, or I'm not responsible. That happened way long time ago. And my uncle, Vine DeLoya Jr., who's he and his brother Sam, the greatest inspirations to me, said something that really got me thinking. He said, a civilization will be judged in history by how they treated those at the sunrise and the sunset of their life. Mm-hmm. So I'm beginning to think about that. And of course, we know that no question, that the first 5 years of our life are key. Of course, that's why in our indigenous cultures, treatment of breastfeeding would go on for 4 years. There would be such a care for the mother in the womb and so forth. So important. At the same time, really, if you think about it, so 5 years old, basic personality is shaped. That is, all this thing that we carry from those before us is there. And really, it's not until we become elders that we really begin to see that change. And so if you have children at 20, 25, you're pretty well in basic form, the same as you were at 5 years old. Now, with that understanding, you take a society we live in where elders no longer are valued, where they're still valued, thankfully, in many societies, but in general, they're put in old folks' homes, or you see these charts of the value of a human being. That you get about 50 and the chart goes down, you're no more value. So think about this in terms of when you eliminate out of your society elders of having any meaningful role, and you have who, by the way, have that influence of to children as elders, things that we can pass on to children, because you have changed from the time you were 5. So really, 7 generations, whoa, we think that's a long time. That's really about 35 years, is all. About 35 years, because that first 5 years determines how you raise your children. Their first 5 years determine how they raise your children. So really, we are the spiritual representative of all that have gone before us. And it's up to us to address what has happened. And that's not that far away. So these attitudes, these beliefs that we instill in children, because children, you see them, they don't even notice, until they are influenced by how our behavior is or what they hear. They don't see the difference between colors of human beings or what religion they are or whatever. But we do that. So I'd say for myself, how did I do that? Well, first of all, it took a spiritual path, what I'm still working on, a spiritual path where I began to realize and understand, and also forgive myself in terms of understanding that everything comes into our life, comes for our own spiritual affecting. And although it may seem like outwardly like fire and vengeance, inwardly it's purifying water. And so as you get older and you begin to realize as your earth suit disintegrates, and all of a sudden you used to be 5'8" and a half, and all of a sudden you're 5'6". You had curly black hair, your hair is kind of dwindling, etc. Your plumbing, not so well. That's when we begin to realize, as you begin to contemplate, and we're only here for a very, very short time. In fact, Crowfoot said it beautifully. We're only here Life, he said, is like the breath of a buffalo on a cold day. Firefly on a warm summer night. Or the shadows vanishing before the setting sun. And so as we awaken to the fact that as our purpose was to grow our physical arms and legs and eyes within the womb world, our purpose here is not to make our earth suit better, because you can look anywhere, it doesn't, but that's to grow our spiritual arms and legs and eyes in here. And that includes, by the way, if we're going to be happy, letting go of these prejudices, letting go of these things. And it takes, by the way, like an elder said, the longest road in the world is from here to here. So for every problem the intellect solves, it creates 10 more. We're not going to get through here. It's when the heart opens, the tears. Took me a long time to let those tears flow. I had to express these things in a safe place, express the rage and anger. At the same time, understanding that layer by layer, you clean it out. And thankfully, hopefully, you begin, so we really, you're right here, right now. And a wise elder is very different than an old warrior. An old warrior who's ready to fight any moment. A wise elder realizes no matter what's said to them, no matter what happens, they know, because they have peace within. They know we have a soul. They know that this life we live is just a short time. They know that what's most important are the spiritual qualities of love, compassion, tenderness, gentleness, and justice, of course. And as we more and more come to that place and just let go of these things, and I mean, it takes some tears. Sometimes we get really knocked down. And like this, I finally want to say I've heard it called the chief song of our white buffalo cavalrymen, and the words starts off, Kola le chel le chu, kola le chel le chu, kola le chel le chu. It says, friend, do it this way. That is, whatever we do in life, as you look at the depth, the spiritual meanings, whatever you do in life, do the very best you can. If you get knocked down, get up. If you get knocked down 1,000 times, get up 1,000 times. Then it says, if you do it that way, your Creator's going to see you. But then comes the covenant. When one sits in the sacred group of the people, one must be responsible, right? That's our part. And if you do it that way, the Creator's part, whatever you ask for, that's exactly what it's going to be. So I would say this. There's natural physical laws. Like if you jump off a 10-story building in your head, you're going to get a headache. Drink a glass of arsenic, you get a stomachache. It just is real. And underlying this entire universe are the spiritual laws, spiritual principles. Development comes from within. And as we understand those spiritual teachings and come in alignment with those, we come in alignment with life itself. When we do that, whoa, we realize, wow, what an incredible world we live in. And then we begin having something so important, and that is compassion for ourselves and compassion for other members of our human family. We begin to wake up and say, we know scientifically without question, human beings genetically, are about 99% the same. We're only different in secondary aspects of our body. We're not this stuff. Something much deeper and more great here. That most people aren't aware. Maybe they haven't have a soul, but we do have a soul, and we are one human family.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. Two things. Stick around because I'm going to take people to your website, but there's something I really want to share that I thought of as you were speaking. And that is, Phil, it's as a coach, I often find people complaining about their ancestors. Oh my God, this alcoholism that I've had in my family all my life, or the domestic violence, or, the very real ancestral issues. But it's so important, I believe, for us to remember that we are living in a time where we have extraordinary freedom and extraordinary wealth because of our ancestors. They crossed the plains, they crossed the oceans, they fought the wars, they worked the 3 jobs, and they had hard lives with one dream, a better life for their offspring. And we're having that. And so they didn't have the time or the resources to deal with the alcoholism or the domestic violence or the racism or whatever it is that we carry down. But now that we have this freedom, so much abundance, so many resources, all the resources that Ayara and Krista and you and Trish and the people that we see on the show bring as coaches. So it's our time to pay back our ancestors and to create the light forward for our offspring by managing the alcohol. Okay, the alcoholism ends with me. The violence ends with me. The domestic violence ends with me. The low self-esteem ends with me. I'm going to do whatever work I need to do so it ends with my genetic line, and it ends with me. And that's how we can honor and remember and appreciate all the freedom that we have because of our ancestors and the incredible wealth. So anyway, I just had to get that in there. And I would love for you to tell us about the work you're doing with the 4 Worlds Global Impact Fund. I put this into the website, into the chat box, of course. But please tell us about this beautiful work that you're doing, Phil.
Well, in 1982, we called a meeting of 40 indigenous leaders from across Turtle Island. And they articulated the guiding principles. Let me just go on up that. I'll just really quickly.
Okay.
And so from that, of course, right at the top is our work unifying our human family. A little bit higher there, a little bit higher there, a little bit higher so I can read it. No, I mean lower, I should say.
Oh, Lord.
That's right.
Unifying our human family, ending war and beginning peace on earth by 2030.
And working with elders and spiritual leaders through our holistic health program in Latin America and the US, we're moving forward in that. We have a great projects going in the Amazon with Darwin Rodriguez and his relatives, working together between indigenous people. We just have our first major class coming out of 4 Worlds Indigenous University because education is so important. We've reestablished this recently at the City of Knowledge in Panama, which is going to be our digital hub for the Union, the Condor, the Quetzal, and the Eagle. Indigenet will be from there. We're working on a global center in indigenous science and ancestral wisdom in La Ventana, Mexico, which is unfolding. And we're building literally. After these years, we've connected together all these digital networks of indigenous people across the Americas, and we're building the digital backbone and architecture that's going to create the first digital nation upon Mother Earth. There's right now, from being about 8 million indigenous people, when we inevitably had this gathering, it went down to 20 million. That is one of the largest genocide ever happened, including what happened in residential schools. Now, we're about 80 million. Only, by the way, of those 80 million, 8 above. And of course, we're doing this whole series, film story called Vision of the Ages, which is going to help people see how these prophecies are actually being manifested today as we speak. So I appreciate being able to, a lot of things there, but they all are interrelated.
Yeah, and I really want to encourage people to donate. Please, let's really support Chief Phil and the wonderful work that he's doing. You can donate cryptocurrency even, by wire, by check. There's a lot of ways to do it. Again, just go to sdgimpactfund.org and then click donate. And let's please support beautiful, beloved Brother Phil. I'm going to bring my teaching partner, Trish, back on. I'm going to bring Krista, and I apologize. I had pronounced it as Lara. I learned it is Ayara. So thank you. So I'm going to bring you all back on one more time. Trish, thoughts, questions that come up for you you'd like before we close out?
Gosh, I have so much to say about that last that last piece. One I'll say is, if you, I want to be the killjoy at the end of the show, but I will. That, you know, I just want to say that to really like think back and to understand history, you don't have to dive into the traumas. It's not exactly necessary, but to look back into history and into your history and the general history of the world. There's lots of amazing books. There's History by Howard Zinn, and there's a Ronald Takaki book that's fantastic, that really gives historical perspective of how the nature of the United States and beyond, from the, we'll call it minority or marginalized perspective. They're really fascinating and they're really heartfelt. It gives you an opportunity to actually empathize with people who don't maybe look like you. I mean, as an example, they were doing forced sterilizations up until 1978 for Native American women and for Hispanic women in the US. So, I mean, that's 1978. I know that that's also with other people of color, and they're also still doing it in prisons. So, I mean, I'm just saying that these things don't just change and don't just move from our consciousness. Like, we are the people now that get to move forward in dissolving this, in becoming the love. If you want to talk to me about history, like, reach out to me. There's a video that I did for you, Scott. I think that it was in a different show, and I do want to run over just a couple things. So you've probably heard me say this a couple times before, is that if we're living if we're all fish in a fishbowl, and the fishbowl is polluted, then we can't even see what we can't see. So this is why we seek out Krista or Lara or Chief Phil or people who can maybe help us see that the water is polluted, because we can't see what we can't see, right? And a couple of things you've heard me say this, I'm inherently, or just because I live in this fishbowl, I'm inherently racist. I know that I am. It's not that I'm choosing to be violent, or I'm actually leaning in to be more loving and to defilter my perspective to be more inclusive, because we live in a system that taught us, like Phil was saying, is like we taught us to play into superiority perspectives. So one of the videos is like 6 steps of how not to be racist, or what are some practical steps that we can take genuinely to reduce social and racial injustice. And we'll find the video and I'll send it out. But one of the things that I was really thinking about right now is that, like, literally the one thing that you can start right now is never think that you have nothing else to learn. Or that when you begin to think that you're right, that's when you begin to separate yourself from God. When you separate yourself from each other, this is where we start to create the separation game. And that this is how the system of dehumanization begins. When I make Scott or Lara or Phil or Krista bad and wrong for their beliefs, that's how we play the cancellation game. And if we're all going to be a global peace tribe, it's about getting curious, right? It's about leaning in. It's about wanting to know and hold the pains that Lara has, and hold the pains that Phil and his family have, and hold the pains that Krista has, and actually be there to walk with each other, because we're walking each other home. And it's just a couple little bits. That's just like my one tidbit. Yeah, and you know, all of the work that I've done in the restorative justice work, it also informs my work. It informs my work with men. white guys are really taking a hit right now. And that's one of the people that I work specifically with, is to help them cultivate a legacy of love in the world, to actually cultivate and step into a legacy of love, which is teaching them how to be more attuned, to feel their bodies, to open their hearts to not only their wants and needs, but to be able to see their loved ones, to see them, to hear them from the delayered perspective, to really truly humanize and to live in wild, abundant integrity. That's part of it.
She's back. And while she was gone, she was also creating a brand new website. I love the name of it. It's TrishWrightLoves.com. And that's where you can learn about all the wonderful things she offers. You know, Trish is a great coach. And she's got these new courses that she's put together. I'm scrolling down. The one she was just talking about, the Dignified Man Coach, the Cultivating a New World class, her sex coaching, her private work. There's a lot of different ways that Trish is making the world a better place. So I just put into the chat box a little bit about Trish, her new website. And thank you, Trish. We're going to go a few minutes longer than usual tonight because I want to still go back to Krista for a moment. I want to hear from Josie Ann, who's done a lot of work in this area. She's one of our favorite ongoing teachers. And we're going to even have one more Omashar song. But I'm going to put the spotlight on Josie Ann, who's coming to us from Florida, where it's midnight. She's not turning into a pumpkin, though. It looks like you've survived midnight and you're beautiful, Josie Ann. Josie Ann, I know that you've even written a book that touches on some of these themes, dealing with racism and some of our genetic challenges. What would you like to share about this topic?
Yes, I thank you, Scott, for letting me just put my 1 cent tonight. And I just want to applaud to all of the guests. That was amazing, fascinating, especially shift field experiences. And it's very similar to the reason why I wrote the book, actually, to speak about people of color and what do they have to offer. When we look at epigenetics, we are looking at one thing, which is trauma, but our ancestors have transmitted to us also resilience. And a lot of times we're not talking about that, although most of the coaches tonight were talking about it. So it's important to know that we have a choice. Choice matters. When you go see a traditional physician, is going to tell you, well, your family have, let's say, diabetes, cancer. So yes, you're going to have it too. No. What changes? What epigenetics means? It means it's different from genes. So you have your DNA sequencing, and it's outside of that sequence that the genes are going to be expressed. And that's what's important. It's going to interfere with the environment, but also with your behavior. And your behavior is conducive to everything else that you want, as long as you make the choice to say, you know what, I do not consent to ego will or thought forms that are limiting myself in this lifetime. I do not consent to slavery. I do not consent to hatred. Although my ancestors have decided that it was the way that our family lineage will be. So we have a say that's bigger than anything else right now. And unfortunately, we talk about a lot for epigenetics about what's wrong, but not what's right. And the book is about what is right. And I interviewed couples to hear them talking about how slavery had transformed the way that they were looking at based on their connection with their ancestors. They were looking at what was the reason that they were alive today. And what the reason why we're alive today is not because of what's wrong, it's because of what works best for us. And if we can just keep this in mind, I think we can change with our relationships, we can change the whole landscape of this wonderful earth. That's all I wanted to say.
It was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I put it into the chat box. That's why everybody watching on Facebook should come into the Zoom room, because it's easier to see what we're putting in the chat box. But if people want more information about wonderful Josie Ann, Dr. Josie Ann, and her beautiful work she does, her website is theintegrativewellness.com, theintegrativewellness.com. And she does couples therapy. She's written a wonderful book. And Josie Ann will be on the show again very, very soon. We're working on a date. So thank you, Josie Ann. Thank you for your love and doing things with so much love. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love how the ethnic diversity we've had, Krista. We've got Ayara from Brazil, and we've got Josie Ann, and we've got Chief Phil. So that makes me always happy. So tell us a little bit about you doing something very special for 11/11. So tell us about that.
Thank you, Scott. So I'm so excited to announce that me and my business partner, Nicole Keating, who's also a member of Soul Search, who's been on the show, we are providing a 3-day event in Sedona. So if you want to spend some time with me in person, going over these topics and just talking about genetics in a bigger way, please tune in. If you go to my Soul Search website, there is a link to that event. And also, Scott, I know I shared with you the event website.
Yep.
But on my Soul Search, we do have an event code for a $80 gift toward the event ticket price. But this event is about activating the New Earth light leaders in this community. This is going to be an annual event. We're creating a community where we are learning and supporting each other in how we consciously collaborate in these new energies, how we manifest, where we are going astrologically, and practices to ground and to be in our daily routine in the new earth. And this is a very experiential experience. We're going to be having the New Earth Cosmic Costume Ball and just really having a fun experience to come together and be in the spirit of play in the New Earth realm. So we're going to be taking a deeper dive into all these things, but so excited about that and would love for all of you to join us if you want to spend some time in person.
And I've put the link again into the website. It's going to be in Sedona. I was just in Sedona for 2 weeks, and it's such a magical place. And I love that it's 88 days and 11 hours from now. I mean, there's something, there's a numerical something there.
There is something, yes. And of course, it's over the 1111 portal. We've been divinely guided to having this, the 1111 gates of heaven. It's where we've been told to activate this energy.
And there's Nicole. We'll all be seeing Nicole in a couple of weeks when we are doing more shows to Soul Search. Ayara from Brazil is actually in Sedona. So there's a very big Sedona frequency coming into the Global Peace Tribe these days. All right. Well, I'm going to bring Trish and Phil on one more time just so we can all twinkle them. And then we'll go to our beloved Omashar to wrap us up with music. Any last thoughts, Phil or Krista, Trish? Any last thoughts you want to share?
I'm happy to share something. I just wanted to say that everything everyone has shared here today has been so, I'd like to just consider it multidimensional. There's so many dimensions of the healing and how we can speak about epigenetics, whether it's health, whether it's trauma, whether it's, ancestral, all these things and how we are healing. But I loved what Chief Phil had to say about it starts with us. It starts with me. And so I just want to echo that in the biggest way of the simplicity of that, because it can be something where you think, wow, I could really go down this rabbit hole. But if you just think about what you can do in your lifetime to say, what am I going to do to feel better, to be healthier, and to speak to the word health span. Health span is quality of life, the entirety of your life. So if you're choosing that, what will that mean? What example will you be to others in your lineage? And how will that impact those to come? Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Krista. One last thing I want to let people know about is there's going to be an online conference, which we just kind of organized. It's called the Ascension of the Soul. And all these people are going to be participating. It's all online. I'm going to put the link in where you can register in a moment. But a lot of the people you've seen on The Awakening World, obviously myself, Tangela, Rachel Spring, the wonderful Brazilian astrologer who we had on a couple of weeks ago, Nicole Keating, Deborah Giusti, my partner for 90 shows of Saturday Night Live, and many, 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 many others. About 3/4 of these people have been on Global Peace Tribe shows. And so it's a 2-day online summit happening October 15th and 16th. And I'll put it in right here is where you can register for it. And it's going to be pretty powerful, really focusing on how we can all truly ascend. And that's The Awakening World leads to ascension, hopefully for us all. So with that, we are going to ascend with the beautiful music of Omashar to complete us. And I hope to see all of you tomorrow night. I'll talk about that show after Omashar's music, but Omashar, take it away, brother.
Here we go. All my relations, I am one with you, and all that you teach me, I give thanks to you. With my heart I listen as I pray, I know you are with me. Four-legged winged ones, creatures great and small, in humble honor I will stand tall, walking straight the path of harmony. All my relations can walk with me. All my relations can walk with me. So in the chat box, sing along. It's in Spanish. All my relations, I am one with you. In all that you teach me, I give thanks to you. With my heart I listen as I pray. I know you are with me, guiding my way. Four-legged winged ones, creatures great and small, in humble honor I will stand tall, walking straight the path of harmony. All my relations can walk with me. All my relations can walk with me. Or is it us?
Big twinkling, dear beloved Omashar. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yes. Hey, just felt appropriate. Thank you so much.
Oh,
to
thank
all of
you.
us. Yeah.
Well, of course, we want to just close by reminding everybody to please join us tomorrow night It's going to be a very, very musical Saturday night. We are going to be previewing the upcoming Bhakti Love Festival. And we're going to have with us Johanna Beekman as my co-host tomorrow night. And we're going to have Larissa Stowe, Jaya Lakshmi, Donna DeLore live, Josh Jaffrey, Kamini, Vedahi, all these amazing musical artists are going to be playing music and talking about this upcoming festival that's happening in mid-September. So tomorrow night, put on your dancing shoes, be ready to move and groove as we have a really, really fun show planned. And again, thank you so much. Great to have Trish back. Great to have Krista with us, and Ayara, Omashar, and most of all of you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go to gallery view one last time so we can all wave goodbye and see each other. Turn on your cameras. Don't be shy. All those beautiful people that we love. And we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow night, or hopefully really, really soon. Take care, everybody. Much love to you.